Good afternoon. My name is George Ferrari, and I serve as CEO of your community foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very special gathering, even if virtual, during these extraordinary times of challenge and opportunity. You represent our closest friends and most generous supporters, and we thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of what we've been able to accomplish thanks to your support. Everything the foundation achieves is because of folks like you, and we want to recognize and celebrate that and share with you some information. Want to let you know that this particular event is being recorded, and you will have the opportunity to ask questions using the question and answer chat box, which is a place for you to provide questions that will be seen by panelists. The chat box is also available to you. It'll be seen by everyone. We're so excited that you're with us, and we have a great program planned for you. Today, we're going to have an opportunity to take a poll during this event and have a question and answer session at the very end. I'm very pleased right now to introduce two folks who will share with you more information. Our board member, Jen Mazza, and staff member, Amy LeViere, who serves as Chief Philanthropic Services Officer. Please enjoy our time together.
Thank you, George, and hello, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Community Foundation Board, it's my pleasure to kick off today's special briefing, which is planned, as George mentioned, for the Foundation's closest friends, supporters, and advocates. In addition to serving on the board, I've had the pleasure of co-chairing the 20th Anniversary Steering Committee. This is the group of volunteers who came together to plan activities acknowledging the Foundation's impact over the past 2 decades. Needless to say, given all that's happened in recent months, most of our plans did not occur exactly as they were originally conceived. Many in-person events, for example, were postponed or reimagined as online virtual programs. Today's gathering is just one example of that. I want to take this opportunity, though, to thank the nearly 24 members of the Anniversary Steering Committee who are serving as honorary hosts for today's gathering for their efforts over the past year and more. You'll find committee members' names listed on the Foundation's website. I also want to acknowledge and thank Janice Conrad, who has provided creative and thorough oversight of 2020 anniversary events, as well as steering committee co-chairs Randy Ehrenberg and Susan Murphy. The upheaval of this year has caused many of us to pause and reflect on how truly grateful we are to live among the hills and valleys and lakes of our region. But this beauty can hide the enormous difficulties faced by our neighbors and our friends, and the agencies and nonprofits that work each day to meet their needs. This is why I personally believe so wholeheartedly in the Community Foundation's work to improve the lives of people throughout Tompkins County and beyond, to serve as a catalyst for change, to ensure access and equity, to support the people and programs that make our community a safe, healthy, vibrant place to work and live. Never has the Community Foundation's commitment been more obvious or more needed than this year. And as you'll hear from others in just a few moments, the Foundation is just one example of its work, has been an indispensable part of the community's infrastructure and a critical funding mechanism for responding to a variety of COVID-19 impacts. Notably, the Foundation also has taken a strong stand on the importance of racial equity and social justice. As an example, 70% of all funds distributed over the past 2.5 years, that's more than $3.3 million, supported organizations employing social justice strategies. And the Foundation's commitment does not end there. As part of the board's current strategic planning process, we are striving to be an even more racially just and equitable organization. And that includes taking a hard look at our own organizational culture, as well as taking action to improve the outcomes and impact of our work. 2020 will be memorable in perhaps all too many ways, but as a community foundation, we will undoubtedly recall the active involvement and generosity of our donors, fund advisors, and many volunteers. Involvement that not only addressed pressing community needs, but also created optimism and hope. On behalf of the board and the Foundation's amazing staff, I want to add my thanks and best wishes to all of you who care so deeply for our community. Now let me turn it over to Amy LeViere and today's other speakers. Amy?
Thanks, Jim. I'm Amy LeViere, and I've been on staff at the foundation for more than a decade. And let me just say, wow, our community responded. You responded. Gifts this year totaled $2.5 million through virtual benefit concerts, online giving, and more. We're humbled and thrilled with new donors, over 250 of you, joining this important work. And a shout out to the Philanthropic Services Committee, Aisha, Bill, Condi, Mario, Mudit, Phil, Priscilla, and Rita. Thank you for your guidance and spirited, thoughtful discussions throughout the year. I want to share several insights from a recent donor survey. When asked of the many needs and issues, which should be a high priority for the foundation, hunger and food insecurity topped the chart, followed by racial equity, social justice, then health, youth, and housing. In responses, however, was the struggle to acknowledge the impact of the pandemic, racial inequities, upcoming elections, noting basic needs, jobs, education, but also feeling torn about support for the arts and the environment. Who of us could say we struggle with which to do when, right? Donors give where they live. Also, 40% report giving to their alma maters. 1 in 5 gives politically, 1 in 5 gives internationally. Charity begins at home, but expands outward. When asked how the Community Foundation might advance racial equity and social justice, responses centered around 4 themes: internal analysis, dialogue, along with convening safe spaces, targeted funding, such as supporting grassroots organizations run by the communities affected, and last, mindfulness, explicit commitment to infusing efforts across all activities. Notable insights such as a seat at the table is useless if you still aren't part of the conversation. More to come as we put together a summary of this survey and continue community conversations. And now I'll turn it over to Theoria and Janet. Theoria?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Theoria Cason. I am a member of the board and additionally a part of the COVID-19 response committee. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon and share my experiences as a member of the review committee. I am employed at Cornell University full-time, but my job has been 100% remote since the middle of March. And so one of the things that reviewing the grants has offered me is the opportunity to be connected to and aware of things that are happening in the local community, because without that information, my life is very much centered around my work and home practices. And the types of grants that we review by organizations within the community are addressing issues like food insecurity and providing services to youth, child care, and elder care. There have been organizations who've requested grants to support mental health and provide services for individuals who've experienced interpersonal violence. One of the things that's really important for you to know with regards to the compounding nature of your contributions is that there have been a number of organizations within the community who needed to respond to virtual engagement by upgrading the software services and facilities that they use. And subsequently, they've also had the opportunity to upskill by making a use of new software. So there's an extension of your donation by virtue of responding to the immediate needs of individuals within the community, but also expanding the way that mental health services or interpersonal violence support can be facilitated in a virtual space. So even after we are no longer expected to engage at a safe distance, those skills will still be invested in the professionals who are doing the work and directly make contact with members of our community. And so with that in mind, I just want to surmise my point of view by saying I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to connect with other members who are vested in the work that needs to be done for all of the members of Tompkins County. You'll see a brief poll on your screen to address a couple of questions just to keep you all engaged. So if you are willing and able, please vote in that poll, but I'm going to turn it over to Janet.
Hello, thanks Theoria. I hope everybody can hear me okay through my mask. This is the new reality we're in. I want to thank Theoria and the rest of the COVID response review team that's been meeting weekly since April to respond with a rapid response to an enormous amount of requests. Thank you for giving us an overview of those, Theoria. You may be wondering what environment I'm in right now. Today I'm here at what was previously Green Stars The Space. This is the building which is now being utilized as expansion space by Finger Lakes Reuse for the next few months. And I'm here because we have been meeting with the New York State Comptroller, Tom DiNapoli. I had conflicting events for this time slot, and through the wonders of technology, we can celebrate these events together. So I just had the privilege of introducing Mr. DiNapoli to our food task force. He's meeting with them now in the next room and learning about its success carrying out a coordinated approach in meeting local needs. So I want to talk a little bit about the food task force today. I know food is close to the hearts of so many of our donors at the foundation. 6 years ago, the Community Foundation began emphasizing collective impact in our funding processes. Our local food serving organizations began meeting regularly to identify their common goals and to develop mutually reinforcing activities. In these years of working together, they developed trusting relationships, and we all know that change happens at the speed of trust. This trust resulted in shared advocacy, collaborative grant writing that has leveraged funding from outside sources, and enhanced cross-sector engagement. This was the long view yesterday, creating impact today. The most abundant fruits of this work are being harvested now. When the pandemic began, the Food Task Force formed quickly, receiving support from our COVID-19 Response Fund, as well as for rapid food distribution carried out by groups such as Cornell Cooperative Extension's Healthy Food for All. The task force focuses on three targeted areas: food production, food distribution, and the health and communication in Tompkins County. It's mobilizing a multitude of organizations. As a result of their work, careful coordination with our schools has facilitated the distribution of healthy, fresh, locally grown produce distributed by the Ithaca City School District, as well as other rural districts within our county. Close collaboration with the Food Bank of the Southern Tier has resulted in targeted food distribution through our network of food pantries, which has rapidly changing needs given the safety implications of the older volunteers they've historically engaged. So there's been a great deal of rapid assessment and adjustment along the way in these recent months. Collaboration with 211 resulted in a streamlined single point of entry for changing protocols and services, which were as increased demands for services have been carried out, and strong collaboration with other programming, such as FoodNet Meals on Wheels, Meals to Go from Loaves and Fishes, food sharing cabinets with mutual aid, and a broad network of place-based collection and distribution sites, partnering with the Friendship Donations Network. This has resulted in a dynamic and targeted distribution system that is building new models of equitable and effective access for both people with historic needs of food insecurity, as well as those new to receiving services. The year to date, the Community Foundation has invested just under $300,000 into local food security organizations and over $715,000 in health and human services overall. We've also been convening other local funders weekly, resulting in a coordinated approach of our local funding entities that is streamlining those needs. So relieving the burden on many of our nonprofit applicant organizations by sharing information with each other, particularly around food security, childcare, housing, many other pressing needs, basic needs. It's hard to talk about collaboration. It's complex. It doesn't make for quick and easy sound bites. No one's making a meme out of complex collaboration. But the truth is, the most thriving communities are engaging wide audiences and the voices of people closest to the issues. And our food task force is certainly no exception. Furthermore, one of the strong tenets of collective impact is around cross-sector engagement. This food task force is engaging leadership such as Anna Kellis, our Tompkins County legislator, Rachel Besner-Kerr, a Cornell professor in the Department of Global Development, Graham Savio, Cooperative Extension, Jay Franklin, not only the Tompkins County Director of Assessment, but also the Director of the Tompkins County Emergency Operations Center, Lindsay Lyman with the Food Bank of the Southern Tier, many, many other local leaders, including Holly Payne, the Food Task Force Coordinator, who was a recent guest on our Let's Talk series. If you haven't seen that, check out our website, and there's a link there if you missed it to get more informed about the details of their work. In addition, we also deeply miss the presence of Kirby Edmonds. Kirby was the inspiration behind many of our local initiatives, and we lost him suddenly on August 22nd. It's been a painful loss for this community. His legacy is strong and profound in Tompkins County, and it will continue to inspire many in our community for years to come. So there's a lot going on, and I'd be happy to further talk with any of you about this work and about how to support this work. So I encourage you to reach out to me. And I also just want to note that none of this could have been carried out without the support of you, our generous donors and volunteers whose love and passion for our community has grown the foundation to its impactful presence in our community today. We thank you for your continued support. And next, I'd like to introduce Ann Martin, board member and chair of the Community Impact Committee, and Nancy Massicci, our Chief Development Officer.
Thanks, Janet. I'm Ann Martin, and as Janet said, I chair the Foundation's Community Impact Committee. So almost a year ago, before COVID, our committee decided we wanted to know just what was the impact of the grants we were making. With the help of a team from Cornell's often engaged initiatives, who introduced us to and then facilitated us through a process called ripple effects mapping, which is a powerful qualitative process, we gathered and mapped stories of impact from 11 of our grantees. You're going to hear about one of those, Nancy Massicci, in a little bit. The stories that we heard and that we analyzed were thought-provoking and surprisingly moving. You'll be glad to know that we learned a lot about the positive impact of the Foundation's grant making. But the process doesn't end there. As it turned out, these results came at a time when the board and staff, as you heard from Jim Mazza, we're beginning to examine the privileged lens through which we do our work. So we looked at what was not in the stories we heard, and we had some questions. For example, where is it we should be having an impact and are not? How will we know this? How are we encouraging grassroots community members and organizations to develop their own visions for change? Does the evidence in the stories we heard show that we are contributing to social and racial justice to the extent that we intend? And are we, through our grant making, contributing to the change in the systems that uphold racism and social justice? Following up on these questions will be a journey. In talking about this here with you, I'm hoping to bring you, fellow donors, along on this journey so that you can experience the same sense of meaning and purpose in giving to the Foundation as I have. And now over to Nancy Massicci, who's going to share one of the great stories we heard in our mapping process. You'll hear about what we saw as positive impact, and it'll also enable you to reflect on some of the questions we're now asking ourselves. Nancy?
Thank you, Anne. I am Nancy Massicci. I've been with the Community Foundation for 5 years, and the Community Foundation has grown in 5 years because of donors. And so at a high level, you are probably aware that Community Foundation donors support 5 different grant sectors: arts and culture, community building, education, health and human services, and the environment. And it is because of donors like you that I'm excited to share a grant story about Finger Lakes reuse. As you might guess, Finger Lakes reuse falls in the environment area. But did you know this nonprofit is a strong local employer as well? As Anne mentioned, there are impactful details from grant making you may not be aware of. A few years ago, because of donor support, Ithaca Reuse Center received a fleet management grant to hire a coordinator for a fleet of trucks. The person they hired did a great job managing the fleet and later applied to manage the store and was promoted. As store manager, she transformed the working environment. She created an inclusive environment, listening well to employees, bringing empathy and welcoming diversity of positive energy and skills. Within a short period, Reuse restructured the workplace, and this woman has risen yet again to becoming managing director. I'm sure you agree, it sounds like she is doing a fantastic job. This one person hired with one grant funded by donors has had a profound impact on the organization and this community. Beyond that, Finger Lakes Reuse currently employs 80 other people. Reuse is a living wage employer, and currently the merchandise sales that they have is enough to cover payroll. So congratulations to Finger Lakes Reuse. This is one example of how donors' gifts provide much needed resources in Tompkins County. I thank you for being one of our donors and for all the ways you invest in the people, programs, and projects that make this a great place to call home. And now I'm going to share and flip this over to George Ferrari. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our presenters so much for the information they shared and the passion from which it comes. The commitment of our board and staff is constantly uplifted by your support as donors and volunteers in the community, by people that bring to us special ideas, challenge us with an opportunity to solve problems that seem insoluble, and by folks who want to collaborate and work together with the mission-driven sector to continue to achieve the kind of quality of life that we all enjoy in our community and how to kind of expand that. In about 5 minutes or so, we're going to open it up to questions. We very much want you to start thinking about and putting into the Q&A section of this webinar questions that you might have as a way of beginning these and continuing these conversations. As Janet referenced, any board or staff member really, really loves talking about the work of the Community Foundation and the results that you've helped us achieve. So this is not your only opportunity, it's just a way to kind of encourage you to begin to think about some questions. We wanted to do this briefing, even though we couldn't be with you in person, for a couple of reasons. One is that we want you to feel really a strong sense of appreciation and gratitude from us at the Community Foundation for what you have made possible. We want to report back to you all the amazing things that are happening in our community. We live in a very socially entrepreneurial kind of place where philanthropy is not limited or not restricted to those of high net worth, but everyone here, I think, understands the opportunity to provide a voluntary contribution of 5 T's, of time, talent, treasure, and testimony, the voice of a variety of lived experience. We need everyone's perspective at the table from the beginning of the process, and ties, the social capital we have, the connections that we have with each other across differences of race, class, gender, sexual orientation. These are important tools that we have. The Community Foundation is developing a declaration of commitments. The community connection is especially important during these unprecedented, challenging times, where we're living during pandemics of public health issues, economic disruption, and longstanding ones of racial injustice and climate degradation, for example. This is our 20th anniversary year, and in many ways, community foundations are built just for these extraordinary times. We are committed to doing whatever it takes in partnership and collaboration with you. Community Foundation board and staff commit with our communities to doing the consciously actionable work of creating racial equity by ending racial disparities caused by systemic racism and by abandoning a mostly unchallenged white lens of understanding and seeing and experiencing with the idea that we need a kaleidoscopic lens. Our commitment to you, in addition to our values, is to be fierce and bold and engage even when we don't know the answers, to hold ourselves accountable to doing better, to be creative and empathic, to understand lived experiences from other perspectives, to be a problem solver, a can-do, promoter of the possibility and the opportunities that challenges provide to us, to be passionate about the values of justice and inclusion, to lead with that intention, to focus, to discipline ourselves, to work in a nurturing, supportive way with all people who want to engage in this work, to be open to new things, to be collaborative. How we think about priorities during pandemics and basic needs such as housing, childcare, and food is part of our commitment, but also in the context in which these are occurring. What is happening to those most affected, most impacted, and why these are reasons why we are focusing on social justice grant making. And why we're taking a look at what our data are telling us and why we are working forward to increase the results of those data. We are in the forever business. What is ahead is unknown, but we know for certain is that we'll need each one of us to contribute those 5 T's to make our communities even better now. Whatever a new normal might be, whatever the challenges and opportunities there are, we need you, our community needs you, and your support of the work of philanthropy, local resources, guided by local people to solve problems in unique local ways is a strong value in this community and one that we celebrate and are honored to support and encourage and collaborate with others. This is our developing declaration of commitments. We'd love to hear feedback and responsiveness to this. We also are really looking forward to our next event, which will be the Women's Fund event on October 29th. Some of you may have heard the sad news over the weekend that one of our former board chairs, Jean Gorczyk, passed away. We will be honoring and memorializing her during that event. She was very involved with the Women's Fund as well. So why don't we open it up now to questions and comments, and we do that by virtue of putting those into the Q&A box. And we'll take a look and see what we have there as people are developing those. I want to remind you that we will have a follow-up email to you with resources that were placed in the chat box during this call. There are resources to a lot of additional information, and also recording of this particular webinar. All right.
So George, there are a couple of that have come in already that we can see. One question relates, and you just mentioned it, but you throw it out to you and to others, relates to housing. Is housing an issue for the Community Foundation right now?
Yes, and certainly anyone else jump in with this as well. We have historically supported housing, and we've been involved in rental assistance programs at various places such as the Robin Fund at GIAC, Catholic Charities, Ithaca Neighborhood Housing Services as some examples of housing, and working closely with the Human Service Coalition's Housing and Homeless Task Force.
George, there's another question about how concerned are you about nonprofits during winter months?
Right. Open it up to any of the panelists to respond to that.
I think this is a really scary time for many of our nonprofits. We're seeing them, like the story that Nina just shared about finger reuse, finding greater resources to both provide and demand for those resources growing in socialization that's this environment. Many organizations that have substantial government funding are seeing major cuts and are frankly questioning, so the stability of their future. Some organizations, some of the arts organizations are able to sort of shutter for a while and then open up again later. So there's a host of different models going on within our nonprofit sector, and there's certainly no one description that fits all of those organizations. We are in relationship with so many organizations, and frankly, this is an area where that local funders group is so is so important, because we are all talking to such a wide variety of organizations, and we're able to consult with each other and respond very frequently with collaborative grants that pools our funds together and provides support. So we're concerned, obviously, with the health of our nonprofits, and of course more so with the populations that they serve. And so this is a time for organizations to be very to step out of the box and to be very creative. And we're seeing evidence of this all over the place, talking to each other and finding out where programs are best fit. And George and I have spent many a meeting in recent weeks consulting with nonprofits around these issues.
So thank you, Jen. I also want to add a couple of things, and I don't want to be pessimistic, but I want to be realistic. For many organizations, many mission-driven sector organizations, this is a challenge which is existential. How do they strategize and think about how to preserve the mission, even if the organization itself might not continue? One of the grants we made in concert with some other local funders was to the Human Service Coalition to provide resources in the form of consultants to engage with organizations that might be considering things like all sorts of affiliations, up to and including mergers, joint efforts, sharing back office functions. This pressure in the environment is going to force organizations to become more effective and more efficient. And also, I think it's important for us to understand that the anticipated and current reduction in state and local governmental support is of such a magnitude, it cannot be replaced by philanthropy itself. So there will be needs to figure out how to do things better and address greater needs with fewer resources. That causes a certain level of stress, but it provides an opportunity to kind of work on that. So we believe that we're not out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination. In the next 6 to 12 months, we'll be seeing more and more of that. So that's why how we engage in philanthropic consulting, helping organizations to work more collaboratively together. I see there's another question. How does the Community Foundation stay on top of the changing landscape? With your help, with your information. We are engaged in a number of task forces and listservs. The weekly meeting of local funders is one way that we do that, as well as people really sharing information with us. But Theoria, I know sometimes during the grant review process, you're also asking grantees for additional information when an application isn't quite clear yet. So there's opportunities there as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do as members of the committee, we try to be very dutiful and fiscally responsible with the resources that have been allocated for the purpose of immediate response to those who've been impacted by coronavirus and COVID-19 within our community. And so if and when we get requests from organizations within the community and how the resources will be applied to immediately impact folks. We don't deny the request, but instead we gather a list of clarifying questions from those who are present for the meeting. And then we go back to the requester and ask them to clarify, like, how do you plan to use these resources? What populations will be impacted? And really provide some supplemental details, because then that informs, I think it helps to better inform the way that they will apply the resources once they've received the funds.
Right.
And it also helps to inform us in the aftermath of applying a grant to ask them questions about how did they actually use the resources, and if there would be, if they anticipate future needs based on the amount that they've received and their assessment of the continued work that needs to be done within the community.
Thank you. Part of our commitment to our work is at the core of everything we do. Donor engagement, philanthropic consulting with donor advisors and others, our grant making, our convening and catalyzing is the concept that this is about relationships. This is about people and people's lives and communities and neighborhoods. So by making a gift to the foundation, that's not a transaction, that's a vote of trust in the work that we do. By making a grant out of the organization to a mission-driven organization in our community, that is a relationship builder. By helping talk with donor advisors to provide them with opportunities to deploy their financial resources that are here at the Community Foundation. That's ongoing relationships. And so people might ask, I see a question about what could a donor do? Certainly, donors have been exceedingly generous by contributing over $360,000 into the current COVID-19 response. We have some of that money remaining, but we know that that amount of money is not sufficient to the need that we anticipate. So certainly donors can support the COVID-19 response fund, can support the work of the foundation itself, can think about what are the opportunities to make a monthly recurring gift or a gift of appreciated stock, whatever it might be. And in doing that, that's, again, an expectation you've placed in us that we hope that we're worthy of that trust to deploy those resources in ways that help address the needs in the community. Are there other folks that want to respond to any of those questions? I know Ann is on that same team that Theoria is on, and Amy works closely with donor advisors.
Yes, I will add one point about what could a donor do to help, because I experienced this in the last few months. Asking me directly, I'm affiliated with the foundation, and me directly, well, what does the community do? What, how can I help? And so you, as nurse, have word among the people you just what the foundation does. This is a critical function in community right now, and just spread out helps us reach many more people in the community than we might otherwise. The other thing I wanted to say is that emphasize when we did this research on the impact of our funding, we were thinking about, what the question people were addressing was, well, what impact has it had on our organization? There were a lot of answers, though, that talked about the building of relationships, the building of trust, the fact that our grant officer, Janet Cotraccia, is in there with people talking about their organization, listening to them and what they need, and helping them figure out how they might navigate toward collaborating with others, for example. So the foundation is really very surprising to me, I have to say, when I figured it out. Really out there interacting with people, and that's one of the major ways that we are able to stay on top.
Mm-hmm.
That reminds me, Anne, I appreciate those comments that, especially in thinking about what can donors do, it makes me think about what have donors done. And donors have given and have given again. Interesting, when we asked people, what did they think likelihood of giving this year would be? Many people said, I'll give as much as I did last year. And about a third of you said, I'll be giving even more than I did last year. Not everybody can do that, but some of us can. And in thinking about trust, yesterday, some of us were reminded that change moves at the speed of trust. And when you talk about relationships, it takes time, it takes getting in there, and it takes building trust.
And we want you to hold us accountable. We want you to tell us when we've messed things up. We want you to tell us when things aren't going according to how we've made public statements. We know that we can't be perfect, but we can seek to constantly improve. And a real loving, trusting relationship sometimes involves hard, challenging conversations and the aspirational hope that things can be made better by those conversations. So this is not an opaque organization. This is an accessible organization to everyone. We really want and need your contribution of your testimony and your time to help make us better as well. We value that so much on our social capital balance sheet. Okay, Nancy, you had another question for us there, I see. Any updates or plans for social justice contributions?
That's right.
Yeah, we're always thinking about that. We're always providing you with, we're trying to balance providing with so many opportunities that gets confusing and frustrating with being donor-centric and helping you find the right way that you want to engage with our work. And that can be challenging sometimes. So there are a lot of funds at the Community Foundation, one that we've had for a number of years now, Social Justice Fund. It has not been as out front or public, although we make a lot of grants that are social justice grants from other funds as well. I don't want you to think we just segregate that to that one fund. But in terms of helping us raise the resources that are designated for that particular purpose, we certainly would give donors opportunities and choices to learn more about that.
I can say a little bit more about that, just that our social justice fund and other social justice priorities were really mobilized in the 2019 fall grant cycle last year, of which we're in the midst right now of reviewing year one grants to make them available for year two. And these are programs that involve things like the Ithaca Green New Deal or the Black Girl Alchemy Project, or support for a college initiative upstate that's providing immense peer support right now for people who've been formerly incarcerated or at risk of incarceration. And so this grant cycle had a very specific targeted emphasis on social justice, and we're excited to move into year two of that process. And if you're giving in support of that to our social justice fund is a great way to continue to support those areas. And there's a litany of other organizations and programs that have been supported by that, and I'd be happy to further share details about that.
So we're coming up toward the end of our time together. I want to again thank you for making time in your busy day during these extraordinary times to learn a little bit more about what's going on, to hear very clearly and directly from us a sense of strong and heartfelt appreciation for the 20 years of support this community has delivered to the Community Foundation, and your trust in us and how to deploy that to serve our community. We will follow up with you with an email that will have a recording of this webinar, as well as some resources. And here's a call to action for you. If you feel so moved, if there was part of this that spoke to you, if you discovered something new, if you said, that's interesting, I'd like to learn more, contact us, reach out to us. We are working, our office is closed to the public, but we're all available by email, as well as share that email that you received from us with this webinar with someone who you think may not know much about the Community Foundation. Say, hey, this is how I spent my lunch on Tuesday. I think this is really some yummy stuff, and I want you to take a look at it and maybe go out and have a conversation with it. So I want to thank you so much for being with us. Again, our next event is our Women's Fund Gathering, virtual gathering on October 29th. We'll be offering that to the community in memory of our dear friend Jean Gorczyk, who passed away over this weekend. And thank you so much to all of our panelists, to all of our attendees. This is what we mean when we say our work is about relationships.
Thank
Have a
you.
good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Stay healthy.